Well, tonight we have a special treat. We have one of our own that's come back. Chris Vaughn was a member here for many years with his family. While he was here, he studied, graduating from Abilene Christian with a degree, a BS degree in Christian ministry and Christian counseling. Chris preached at the Clyde Church of Christ for 3.5 years, and they're currently attending the Hillcrest Church in Abilene. Chris is now working with the Arrow Ford in Abilene. But we wanted to, when we were looking at our summer series, to have Chris back again. He's done such a good job in the past, and it's always good to see Chris and his family come home. You may not recognize the boys. They're a little bit taller, and pretty soon, Chris, they're going to be doing this to you, and doing that measurement contest. But we're glad to have Jordana and the rest of his children, Jaden, Carson, and Wesley. And so be sure and take time to greet them again and to welcome them back. And at this time, we would like to dismiss our children ages 6th grade on down to your classes. And then while Chris is getting set up, we are very fortunate to have him speak to us on lessons from COVID, the pandemic, what I learned about God, myself, and the church. Chris.
Is it working now? We're good? Hey, there you go. So my oldest is already taller than both me and Jordana. So don't point it out to him because he really doesn't like it. And I learned a long time ago that as a parent, the reason you get invited to places is so people can see your kids. And that's just how that goes. So that's fine. But yeah, it is great to be here, and I always look forward to being able to come back here and see familiar faces, see new faces, and just an opportunity to study and bring some of the Word to you. So let's go ahead and jump in. I'm going to be in Psalm 27, but before we do that, I always like to give a blessing. This tape thing, I got to remember not to walk off. We're going to do a blessing. I like to start out every time I talk to giving a blessing. The blessing is found in Numbers 6, 24 and 26. It reads, "The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace." That's a blessing that God longs for his people to have. And I think there's no better place that can be found but in the body of believers, in his church. We can experience this blessing on the daily basis when we're living life together as his people. So let's go ahead and jump right in. We're going to start in 27. We're going to take a look at the whole thing. I'm going to read from the CSB, and you can read along with me in whatever version you've got there. I find it's really helpful to just go ahead and read through the whole of Scripture and dig in. "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom should I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Whom should I dread? When evildoers came against me to devour my flesh, my foes and my enemies stumbled and fell. Though an army deploys against me, my heart will not be afraid. Though a war breaks out against me, I will still be confident. I have asked one thing from the Lord. It is what I desire, to dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, gazing on the beauty of the Lord and seeking him in his temple. For he will conceal me in his shelter. In the day of adversity, he will hide me under the cover of his tent. He will set me on a high rock. Then my head will be high above my enemies around me. I will offer sacrifices in his tent with shouts of joy. I will sing and make music to the Lord. Lord, hear my voice when I call. Be gracious to me and answer me. My heart says this about you. Seek his face. The Lord, I will seek your face. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger. You have been my helper. Do not leave me or abandon me, God of my salvation. Even if my father and mother abandon me, the Lord cares for me. Because of my adversaries, show me your way, Lord, and lead me on the level path. Do not give me over to the will of my foes, for false witnesses rise up against me, breathing violence. I am certain I will see the Lord's goodness in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and let your heart be courageous. Wait for the Lord. One of the things that I have recently learned is just a new level of appreciation for the Psalms, for the emotion behind. I tend to be a very logical thinker. I like to think things through logically. I like to have the bullet points laid out, and then I want to have a direct instruction plan. What am I going to do going forward? I want to have all of these things laid out, and it's really difficult for me when they're not. But lately, I've really begun to uncover this idea of the emotion behind the Scriptures, the feelings of God, the feelings of man, the wrestling on the inward in the spirit that takes place. And I love this idea of looking back at what we've learned. I think that there's many times that we can get kind of stuck just going through the day-to-day, so it's important for us to stop and think about those lessons and what have we learned. And so these are just a few of the things that I've seen. I wanted to start off by talking about lessons that we've learned from the world. What have we seen in the world through this pandemic that never seems to end? If it's not one thing, it's another thing. It's always what's going to come down the pike next. Anybody feel that, or is it just me? It's never ending, right? It's just going to keep on going. Like there's always the next thing. But we've learned that the world hasn't changed. The world we live in remains the same. Sometimes we like to think that we've evolved or that we've progressed, that we've got all these technological advances and that we've got all this knowledge. We're so much smarter than we were. Like, for crying out loud, we used to think the earth was flat. Like, we know so much more now, and we're so much better off for it. We've got this great idea in that, you know what, look, these problems we're facing in the world, they're new problems because of all the new advances and all the new things that we've done. In fact, one of my family's favorite places to go whenever we are able to visit the Metroplex, if we're able just to come out here, one of our favorite places is the Perot Museum. Anybody been to the Perot Museum over there in Dallas? It's fantastic, right? It's an awesome museum. It's got it's 5 stories tall, just endless. Each level is a whole nother devoted to these subjects and their in-depth detail about this and that. We've got the whole world explained. We figured it all out. We understand it. It's a great place for learning. Yet in the end, it's just a monument to how far we think we've come, how much we think we get it, and how much the world is different. But despite all these modern trappings, all these modern problems that we have, they're all rooted in the same core issues that we've always had and the desires of man. We have always sought ways to connect with each other. Ever since that horizontal relationship was broken back in Genesis, we've always been looking for ways to connect, right? We had this perfect connection with Adam and Eve. There was no shame, there was no guilt, there were no barriers. They walked completely and totally perfectly with each other and completely and totally perfectly with God. And then sin entered. And ever since then, from that day forward, it's always been, how do we do this horizontal relationship with others that we live with, those that we come in contact with? How do we do relationship? And despite the fact that we've got modern things like social media and stuff, we still can't figure out how to act with each other horizontally. Anybody seen some of the comments on social media? We're not very good at it. We've always strived to control our environments. We've always strived to find another way to control everything. We look at modern medicine, the ability, we want to control life. We want to be able to prolong life. We want to be able to affect the quality of our lives. We want that next thing that's going to be able to give us the control that we're looking for over the world around us. You see entire commercials, that's what they're devoted to. They're devoted to improving your situation. They're devoted to improving your surroundings, improving all of these things for you. One of my favorite ones is I'm a pretty big coffee drinker, and I've seen a lot of ads, and I really anybody who tells me that social media and the internet and they don't listen to you is lying. I will contend that all day, because I get ads for this new kind of coffee, this mud water stuff that's supposed to be all this special stuff. Hey, coffee wasn't the way, but this is the way. We think we know. We think we've got it all figured out, and this is the same core problem. We've always wanted to have control. We've always wanted to have a relationship horizontally. It's always been the same. We have always desired to explain everything, right? What was one of the main reasons that Eve ate the fruit? She looked at it and saw that it was desirable to gain knowledge. Trusting God and what He said wasn't good enough, and it's never been good enough for us, and that's a problem. That's one of our key problems. In fact, you could argue that that is the problem, is our lack of trust. Instead, we want to know for ourselves. We've always wanted to have an alternate explanation for everything, right? God says, I put the rainbow up in the sky as a promise for you that I'm not going to flood the earth again. And we sit here and we're like, what makes that go? And we want to explain it. We want to understand it. And to some degree, I mean, there's probably not anything wrong with that desire to want to grow and know more and learn more, but there's definitely a seeking and taking it too far that we do. At the end of the day, we see the first lesson is that Ecclesiastes 1 is right. Ecclesiastes 1, 9 and 11 reads, What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. No one can say anything or say about anything, look, this is new. It has already existed in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of those who came before, and of those who will come after. There will also be no remembrance by those who follow them. It's all the same. It's all been done. The world is just the same. It hasn't changed. The second thing, I was supposed to click that, my bad. The second thing is that we are not in control. This one was really big for me, going through the COVID situation, especially in that lockdown and in everything else. We're not in control. So, some of us who are older in here have probably gone through other circumstances in life, other periods in history where, the world is spinning in such a way that there are big monumental things that are happening around you and you can't control them. You can think of in the past like World War II, World War I, right? You can talk about the Cold War. You can talk about all these things that are big deal things, that are history-shaping things that have gone on in people's lives. And the regular, everyday people, we don't have any control over those. COVID is really the first one that I can really recall being, I don't know, adult enough, whatever you want to call that. I don't know, cognitively aware enough. It's the first one for me that it really, really affects and hits home that, there's something going on and it's drastically affecting my life and there's nothing I can do about it. I don't have the ability to fix this situation. And sure, we day to day, we have to deal with that in our lives, right? We have to deal with the idea of, my tire goes flat, it's a detour in my life and it's really unpleasant and unfortunate. Or we can have something even a little bit bigger. But I'm talking about widespread, global level. The world has changed and it's beyond anybody's control to fix it. If you're like me, sometimes you go through your day-to-day life, not sometimes, oftentimes, most of the times, you go through your day-to-day life, you do the same things. I'm a very big creature of habit. It's one of the things that my wife likes to pick on me for sometimes because I'm very predictable, right? I have the same patterns, the same habits, the same everything. If I don't get stopped, I'm going to do pretty much the same thing every single day, every single time, right? I'm a big-time creature of habit. But we all are to some extent. We have things where we get up in the morning, we have our set time that we've got to get up, And then we've got our set breakfast. You may have like 2 or 3 different things that you eat for breakfast, maybe a couple more, we'll give you that. But you got your breakfast and you go about your day. You've got a plan. So you've got work, you've got all the same things. You're going to go to work and you're going to do the same thing, or you've got your agenda, your chore list. It's all the same. You're going to do the same thing. And we can trick ourselves in this to-do list, in this everyday mundane stuff, into thinking that we have control over what's happening. I am in control of my life. I am the captain of this ship. And it takes something sometimes to really make us realize you don't control anything. The control that you think you have is an illusion. It is not real. And it's amazing the kind of things that can just knock that off. The idleness can cause us to be complacent. And so this has been a good lesson that we are not in control. We do not have control over the future. We don't even have control in the now half the time. We're just responding as we normally do to things that are coming at us in the best way that we can. And that's the amount of control you've got. That's it. Kind of tying together with that is that creation is still in darkness. Part of that complacency is because, we really don't feel threatened by anything. There's no real external threat or external thing that's really challenging me on the day-to-day for my very life to be at stake. There's nothing that's really going on that makes me say, you know what, I need to be careful, I need to be aware, I need to be alert. Because I've been doing the same thing over and over and over again. It's been the same day, doing the same things. And you know what? I know I'm not promised tomorrow. I went to Bible class. I know I'm not promised tomorrow, but odds are pretty good I'm going to do the same thing tomorrow. And we forget that creation is in darkness. That this world is not a safe place. In Ephesians 6, 11 and 12, we're given the armor of God that we are supposed to wear to fight our spiritual battles, to fight our adversaries, to fight off the darkness. And I think one of the great things that the devil has done, especially in our culture, is to make us think that we're safe and that we don't need that. Yes, you're allowed to go to church. You're allowed to do this. You've got a lot of freedoms here, and we thank God for them every day. And sometimes those very freedoms are the things that cause us to be complacent, and those things that cause us to say, you know what, I don't really need that helmet of salvation today. I'm just going to go through my day-to-day life. I'm going to do what I always do. That sword, I can leave it at home. It's kind of heavy. I'm not really going to fight anybody today. I'm not going to have to pull out the word today. I don't think Satan's going to come and tempt me today. It's a great problem that we have to address. And I think COVID is a lesson in that. It's a lesson in saying, you know what? There's darkness out there that you cannot control and that you cannot stop. And if you are not ready for, you will get run over. We learn that we're not in control and that this world is not safe. But this leads us directly into what we learn about God, what this pandemic talks to us about God, and what kind of lessons can we go to. And maybe, like I said, some of these are things that we know and we understand, but it's a real cognitive example, right, of these things. And the first one, to me, is that God is always right. He's always right. It doesn't matter what situation it is. I just find that amazing that in God's wisdom, like whole other level, can't even get there, like 10 levels up wisdom. It doesn't matter whether things are good, whether things are bad. It doesn't matter whether you accept God or reject God. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Every decision, every event proves that God is right, He's always told the truth, and that He deserves to be trusted in. That He's the only one that deserves to be trusted. He's the only thing that deserves to be trusted in. He's always right. Secondly, is that God is sovereign. It's a big fancy way of saying that God is in control. God is on the throne. He's the big man. And while we don't have control over anything in this world, we barely have control over our own health and body sometimes, God has complete and total control of everything. He has control over creation. You can look in Matthew 5:45. That's just the account of Jesus going out, and they're out on the boat, and there's a big storm that blows up. And he gets up and he calms the wind and the waves, and the people are amazed that even creation, even the wind and the waves obey him. You can talk about both of those are examples of, or accounts of that one. But you can talk about all kinds of other examples, right? From the Old Testament, stories of God prolonging the day, stories of God splitting the Red Sea. He sends rain as they're boarding on the ark and floods the whole earth, right? Story after story after story. God is sovereign over His creation. But God is also sovereign over humanity. In Exodus 4:21, God tells Moses to go and talk to Pharaoh and say, "Let my people go." And he says, but he will not do it because I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart. It's an interesting thing. We don't really like to talk about that one too much because it proposes a little bit of a challenge to us. Understand the balance there with free will, right? We completely and totally, free will is a gift of a sovereign God, okay? So God has complete control over everyone. He can do whatever He wills, and it's a lesson we can go dig deep later on, but He can do whatever He wills with humanity. However, to accomplish His ends and for His glory, He gifts humanity free will, right? So God sovereignly gives free will for His purposes. Okay? Free will does not mean that God is not still sovereign. It just means that He has given it to you. Okay? And think about this part of it. Even in the free will, remember we're talking about that whole other level that God is operating on. God knows all the choices that you're going to make. Being outside of time, right? Being spiritual in that sense. He's outside of time. And that means He's in the past, He's in the future, He's everything. It's in a whole nother level that our brains can't get because we're finite. We don't understand that. But God knows all the free will choices, and He knows everything that you're going to choose to do. He knows every experience you're going to encounter before you do. He knows every thought you're going to have before you do. And think about where you are. That He has put you here on this earth in the United States of America, in Fort Worth, Texas, at this period in history. God is sovereign over all. He is in complete and total control. And this is great news for us. Sometimes we can think that and say that that's scary, but it's not scary because of what we read in Romans 8:28. It says that we know that all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to His purpose. That's us. So while we know that we can't control anything and that we've got to struggle with the day-to-day and we just got to take it as it comes as best we can, we know that there is a God in heaven, and He is sitting on His throne, and He knows everything, and everything is working together for the good of His children. That's good news. The last thing that I wanted to bring up, lessons about God, or things we learn about God from the pandemic, things that we can see in action, is that God's plan is not your plan. It's not always. Sometimes it is. We strive to be in God's plan as best we can, but sometimes God's plan is not what we expect. Look at this middle, and this is why I picked Psalm 27, because I loved the middle and the end. Let's just read the middle there as it sits. Lord, hear my voice when I call. Be gracious to me and answer me. My heart says this about you, seek his face. Lord, I will seek your face. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger. You have been my helper. Do not leave me or abandon me. God of my salvation, even if my father and mother abandon me, the Lord cares for me. Because of my adversaries, show me your way, Lord. Lead me on a level path, and do not give me over to the will of my foes, for false witnesses rise up against me, breathing violence. Just in that. This is where it's really, you got to get in the emotion of it. We don't know exactly when David penned this one. I read one scholar said that they believed it to be during the time that Absalom was in his rebellion. That could be. It could be when he was in the desert being chased by King Saul, running for his life. That could be. But feel the emotion. God, don't leave me. God, this doesn't make as much sense as I thought it did. Show me your level path, because I don't think I'm going the right way anymore. God, things aren't working out like I thought they were going to. There's this raw emotion in there in the middle of this. He starts out with this confidence that the Lord is my salvation and my light. He's this and he's that. I'm going to hide in his shelter. I'm going to be rescued by it. And then right into this. The other thing I really love about this, and really all the Psalms, is that God is not afraid of our emotions. He's not afraid of our anger. You read some of the Psalms? David is mad. God is not afraid of our doubt. He is not afraid of you being scared. God is ready to deal with all of us. We don't have to put on a brave face for God. He knows who you are and he knows what you're feeling. And he wants you to bring all of you to him. Has anybody been in those situations? Just in the pandemic alone. You know, it's weird. I tend to be pretty self-isolating all by myself. I like to be with my five, or the five of us, my four. Right, I'm the fifth one. I like to be with my four, and that's pretty much it. But it's weird. You tell me I'm locked down, and all of a sudden I want to go see the world. I want to get out. God, this doesn't make any sense. And then when we've got different shortages of this and that and things that we need, things that we have come to rely on, God, it doesn't make sense. What is your plan? I thought we were on the same page. Maybe it's different. Maybe something didn't go the right way at work, either because of the pandemic or for some other reason. Things didn't go the way at work, and you're sitting there like, God, I thought we had a plan. I thought we were on the same page. Don't leave me. Maybe it's health related that causes you to question or causes you to be afraid that you're on a different plan from God. But I love the way he ends. Love the way he ends there. 13 and 14. He falls back to trust. Verses 13 and 14. I am certain that I will see the Lord's goodness in the land of the living. Certain. Hasn't seen it yet. but I will. I will see the Lord's goodness. Make a distinction, at least I do, and this may be a personal opinion, but there's, I think, a distinction between goodness and safety. There's a distinction between goodness and comfort that needs to be made. Because sometimes when we're in those moments and things aren't comfortable for us, we tend to say, God, things were going all great, but I'm not comfortable anymore, and we need to fix this. Which is another lesson that I've learned for myself through this pandemic, is that suffering is a really good thing. Do not be afraid to suffer. Do not be afraid to go through it with God. Don't go through it alone. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But suffering is a good thing to experience. Because when you walk with suffering with fellow believers, and you walk through suffering with God, that's where growth happens. That's where transformation happens. If it's easy, you're not going to go anywhere. And I believe that with all my heart, 100%. That's probably my biggest lesson for this whole pandemic. Embrace the suffering as best you can. It's okay to cry out to God about it while it's going on for you, right? David's doing that right here in the text. But don't shy away from it. There's a difference between goodness and safety, and goodness and comfort. We're going to see God's goodness, and His goodness isn't always what we think we want, because sometimes we just want to be safe and comfortable in our little bubble and be allowed to live our lives, and God says, hey, I got way more planned for you than that. I've got way more things for you to do than for you just to sit going through your day-to-day. But you got to walk with me, and it's not always going to be fun. There's a line in Chronicles of Narnia, I think. You guys know the Chronicles of Narnia. There's a big lion named Aslan. He basically is the symbolic of the God character for that series. And one of the little girls asked one of the other characters as Aslan is walking away, is he safe? And I just love the way the character responds. No, he's not safe, but he is good. That's the God we serve. He's not always safe, but he is good. And he's working for the good in us. Sometimes our plan just isn't his plan, which means ultimately we got to change our plan, right? This idea of waiting for the Lord, this is the last thing I wanted to touch on this part. This idea of waiting for the Lord doesn't mean we sit doing nothing, okay? When we're talking about waiting on the Lord, there's still tons to do. There's still tons to go. We're not just going to sit idly by and say, well, I'm kind of waiting on God to do something any day now. It's not what we're talking about. When we're talking about waiting, there is activity involved. There is growth involved. There are things involved, right? God wants to partner with us in the walk. When God told Noah that he was going to send a flood, he didn't say, hey, here's the boat, wait for me to build it. I'm going to build it in a couple years. It's going to be done in about a year, I'll build it. He said, Noah, you build the boat. Waiting on the Lord doesn't mean idleness. So David leans on God. Proverbs 19:21, it tells us that, oh boy, I had it. It says, many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's decree that will prevail. Remember, God is sovereign. This brings us to what I learned about the church. And this is probably the biggest thing for me. This one is the most impactful, personal. This is a big deal for me. Is that the church is desperately needed. I'm not talking about a social club church. I'm not talking about a social active group. I'm talking about the Lord's church. The church that back in the first century turned the world on its head. The church that was so passionately convicted of their calling and their purpose that they went into anything. They were willing to pay any cost, and a lot of them did. The church is so needed right now. There are many that would suggest that the church it's outdated, it's too broken, and that we can follow Jesus without that part of it. This thinking can usually results from past hurt. It results in a lack of commitment. In some cases, it results in a lack of understanding, right? I just don't understand church. In some cases, it's because the church itself has lost its drive, has lost something, that fire underneath it. But at any rate, the church is God's chosen agent for change in this broken, uncontrollable, dark world. That's the agent. The sovereign God who's in control over everything says that's what's going to do it. You and I are what's going to do it. That's the job. That's the purpose. And the world needs that desperately. Matthew 28, Jesus tells his church, you and I, to go and make disciples. There are many people out there feeling the effects of a world that is out of their control. They're feeling the effects of broken relationships. They're feeling the effects of broken dreams and broken promises. Does anybody remember what it's like to be on that rat race? Some of us just got off it yesterday. I fall back sometimes. There's a brokenness and a longing and a searching for something. Something that's going to fill this hole. Something that's going to come through for me in the end. Something that's going to give me this feeling of purpose, this feeling of belonging, that's going to build my self-esteem and be everything I ever needed. And God says, church, you're supposed to go tell them about my son. You're supposed to go tell them about that thing that is the only thing that will fit in their hole, that's in their heart, and it's the only thing that won't fail. The church doesn't need more programs. It doesn't need more things to do on the calendar. It just needs its members, the body, to go and do what God called it to do in the first place. To get out there in the communities and to shine the light. Be the salt. The world needs that kind of church. We're called to wade into the messiness of this world, armed with the Word, armed with that full armor of God that we talked about in Ephesians 6, and to point people with our testimonies and the Word of God, point people back to Him, so that they too can remain confident, like David did in 13 and 14, that we will see the goodness of God, that we will wait on Him and stand courageous. We've got to break off the chains that cause us to hesitate as a church. Personally, too. I'm in there for sure. That cause us to hesitate on being what God called us to be. And to find other ways to get the message out even more, right? Doing things like live streaming, doing things like just having the community in, right? going out and in each one, working with one, right? We've got to get back to that first century model of reckless abandon for the mission. Sharing God's word any and all cost. As we wrap up tonight, I want to encourage you forward in that work, individually and collectively as the church. It is my prayer that we take the lessons that we learned from COVID and all other scenarios in life and all the things that we go through, and we take these lessons. These are those bad things that sometimes happen that still prove God right. And we can look back on those bad things and say, man, our God is still good. We can look back on those things and say, man, if we use this to go forward, what a world we could make, what an impact we could have for the Lord and for His kingdom. I want to encourage you to keep going forward, that we dive deeper and drive deeper into the arms of our Creator, and that drives us out into the mission field to proclaim Him. Never stop being hungry for Him. Don't ever get to a point, and this is another lesson for me, last one, and we're going to wrap up. Another lesson that I learned about myself is the reinforcement, I guess, because it's something that I cognitively know, but again, until it really drives down in your heart that you know in your heart of hearts, it's not really a thing. You got to have the whole picture. There's never a such thing as too much. There's never a point in your life that you're going to get it all and that you're going to be done. There's never a point where you're filled up with God enough and you know what, that's going to last me for the month or the week or the year or whatever. Always need more. Drive deeper into Him. Whenever you think, you know what, I'm really tired and I really don't want to keep pushing, push anyway. Because that's what gives us the confidence to say that we will see the goodness of God no matter the circumstances. Tonight, if you need any encouragement, need any prayers, or perhaps you have a praise, or maybe you want to be part of the kingdom and you want to take that step in baptism, whatever your need is, we ask that you come as we sing the invitation song.